Good evening. I am calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, July the 17th, 2023 to order. With that, if the city clerk can give us a roll call.
Councilmember Keel.
Present.
Councilmember Wood.
Present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Here.
Councilmember Belisi.
Here.
Councilmember Fleming is excused. Mayor Worthington is excused. Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Present. With that, if Councilmember McCluskey can lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please have your seat.
Thank you. And the next business is approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Councilmember Belisi. I make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Councilmember Keel, I second.
And thank you both. And we're at public comments now. And if
No.
you...
Point of order, you need to ask if there's any.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. I'd like to, all in favor of the approval of the agenda as motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now we get to the public comments. And with that, please, it should be on the screen by now on the public comment direction. And for those that are online that would like to provide public comment, please look at the screenshot. For now, though, do I have anybody here to sign up? Present. While you're doing that, I do have a hand of raised. So, Chris, if you'd like to come up, provide your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. And if you can move your mic close to you so it gets recorded properly. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm Chris Saunders, and I live on 40th Street West in University Place, and I am representing University Place Parks and Recreation Foundation today. And I'm just here to tell you how we are doing with the Inclusive Playground. As all of you already know, the first money that came in through the Rotary of $5,000, which is in the bank, which is a really important step for us. And we have 2 other foundations that we're glad to announce tonight who are helping. We're not going to give any dollar amounts, but both Cheney and Names Foundation have agreed to partner with us. So we're very excited about that. We have others in the works, but they're the ones we can publicly state at this point. So that's all we've got. And we're pretty excited about how the progress is going. So, thank you.
City Clerk, was there anybody signed up? Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make public comment? None coming forward. I'll move on to close the public comments and move on to the next agenda item. And before I do, and that's the consent, I want to make sure, because I didn't catch it, and maybe it's just my ears, but we have Councilmember Edward Woods online, and so we do have a forum for those that are here. And does the roll call, did we hear him? Okay, thank you. With that, here, okay, thank you. With that, I'd like to have a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda as proposed.
Councilmember Belisi, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Thank you both. Any objections, any changes to the consent agenda? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And item number 7, city manager and council comments and reports. So, City Manager Steve Sugg.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Just one item for City Manager's report tonight, and that is I'm pleased to report in the second quarter of 2023, we had a very good second quarter as far as economic development is concerned. I can report that we have now 112 new businesses alone in that quarter. 23 of them are storefront, 89 are home-based, so that's a pretty good number. Our total to date of businesses is in the city is 1,714. 804 of those are storefront, and 910 are home-based, so just about a 50-50 split. And that's my report for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. And I'll just start with my left over here on Councilmember Keel for the councilman report.
Great, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just, Steve, I just want to say those are exciting numbers. 112 new, so that's in the 50-50 split. That's something I didn't know, so I appreciate you sharing that. For the rest of my report today, I just want to announce that this week, starting tomorrow, will be the National League of Cities Conference. The national cities are coming to Tacoma. The summer conference starts tomorrow. It is a free conference, so if any of my colleagues want to, happen down to the Marriott downtown Tacoma, you'll see a whole bunch of fellow council members from around the country. We'll be there, talking the stuff that we talk around as far as, housing and public safety and all those kinds of things like that, and a lot of other topics, growing neighborhoods. There will be an NLC board meeting there too. Of course, I'll be there for all of those festivities, and it's just gonna be a great time. So if you're not doing anything, I would encourage you just to go down. Like I said, registration is free, so you'll be able to go in and participate with NLC on tomorrow, and that'll be Tuesday through Friday. So that's what I'll be doing. That's it for me.
What time does it start and what time is it?
The first starts at 8:30 with breakfast, but we can give you a email. If you can help me with that, Deborah, if you can just maybe email all that to the council members, that one list that's got all the activities. Yeah, thank you.
Very
So we'll
good.
get that to you in email.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember McCuskey.
I have nothing to report today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Belisi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to let people know that this past weekend we had the JBLM Air Show and Warrior Expo, and I was honored to attend as a guest of the base commander. And it was wonderful to be out and about after 7 years of not having the air show, and to see my Thunderbirds, rather, Air Force Thunderbirds, being the Air Force brat that I am. It was nice to listen to the roar of the jets and to even see the 16th Cab with their performance out there. So, and it was nice talking with all the muckety-muck, so to speak, at the tent. But it was a nice, warm, exceptionally hot day, but the performance was lovely. Yesterday, the Teddy Bear Picnic went off at the Curran Apple Orchard, and both Councilmember McCluskey and myself were there volunteering to help with to ensure that this will go on, and that there was enough volunteers to engage the kids that were there. It was a pretty hefty turnout yesterday, and it was a wonderful free family event. So those in the community that have young children, or if you're just wanting to get out and have a nice family event, I would suggest that you pay attention to our e-newsletter, and when the event comes around next year, that you make sure and put it on your calendar and plan on attending. Dance Theater Northwest is the entity that's responsible for organizing this event and getting the sponsorships and getting the volunteers out to do this free event. And without their enthusiasm, it would be very difficult to have this event continue. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Melanie Kirkstoffer for all her hard work and for the dancers that she had out there yesterday and in the heat in the teddy bear costumes. It was really a wonderful, wonderful event. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
And thank you for both of you and McCluskey for representing the council. Thank you. I don't have much except that this week, Thursday, will be the PCRC meeting, and I don't have anything for PRSC at this point, so those are my comments. And with that, I'd like to close the regular meeting.
Mayor?
Oh, you're over there on the far side of the moon. Okay, so my apologies. Councilmember Wood.
Just a few things. First, apologize I can't be there in person. For those of you who don't know, I've been out with COVID. I'm on my 3rd week of symptoms, and it's really unpleasant. This is a mild case, too, supposedly. Just want to remind our public that we have a lot of activities going on over the next few weeks. We have a Twisted Cider 5K coming up on the, I want to say it's the 29th. I hope I got that date right.
Yep.
We have National Night Out coming up on August 1st, and if you want to sign up your neighborhood, the deadline is July 27th. And there are a whole bunch of concerts, movies, and other activities going around the city. The UP newsletter has all this information. I assume the website does as well. I'd encourage people to get out, meet your friends and neighbors, don't share COVID, and have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you for those reminders, Councilmember. Thank you. With that, I'm not seeing any other comments, so I will close the regular meeting now. And we'll move on to the study session. And the first item number 8 is the 2023 carry forward budget adjustment. And I think we have staff member Leslie Blaisdell to give us a report.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director. Tonight we're doing the carry forward budget adjustment. So Amanda, if you can go to slide number 2. The carry forward adjustments recognize the carry forward of funding from the 2022 budget for reappropriation in 2023. The reappropriation is comprised primarily of beginning fund balance adjustments, capital improvement projects, internal service fund carry forwards, and continuing grant funding. We've also included some other requested adjustments, which are detailed later in the memo. Next slide. The most significant change you'll note is in our restricted and CIP funds. This change is mostly reflective of carry forwards in revenues and expenditures in Park CIP, Public Works CIP, and Muni CIP projects and their related interfund transfers. Just a reminder that appropriations for capital improvements are continuing in nature. We tend to budget the full cost of a project in 1 year, not knowing how the construction schedule will go, and then we just carry forward at year's end what is left to be spent in the following years. In Public Works CIP, we're carrying forward fund balances and previously budgeted 2022 project expenditures totaling $24.6 million. A good chunk of that is the $6.4 million for the ARPA funding sewer project, the other sewer project for $2.1 million, and then just the variety of projects that we've received grant funding for. In the municipal CIP fund, we're carrying forward remaining funding of $1,500 for the grease interceptor project. There was one piece that still had to be completed at the beginning of this year, so that had to carry forward. There are 2 adjustments in this fund. One is an increase in the Public Works Shop parking lot improvement project of $210,000. This was originally budgeted at $40,000 for ADA concrete improvements and parking lot expansion. But the current cost estimate for that work is now $50,000, so that's the additional part of it is additional $10,000. The remaining $200,000 is for Public Works Shop asphalt repairs and replacement. Staff had planned on using $200,000 of pavement maintenance funds from a canceled project, but I had to remind them that those funds are for street pavement maintenance, so this is a separate project and would need separate funding. So they're requesting $200,000 for that. That would come from REIT funding. which, as you know, is restricted for capital projects. And then there's an addition of $20,000 for design costs of a Public Works office expansion, and this would also be covered with REIT transfer. In the Park CIP fund, we're carrying forward fund balance in previously budgeted projects totaling $3.58 million. This adjustment also includes the adjustment of $588,500 for the projects to be funded with ARPA dollars that Council approved late last year. And the other half of those projects is with Parks impact fees. And I've listed those projects in your memo for you to refer to if you need to. If we can go to the next slide. For carry forwards on the revenue side, the most significant ones are the remaining $7.4 million of ARPA funding that has yet to be spent. There's a Department of Commerce grant for $62,500. The Town Center land sale, that's lot 11 at 35th and Bridgeport Way, was originally budgeted in '22. We're pushing it to 2023 so that it's there if it happens this year. Otherwise, I'll be telling you about it again next year. So, and then there's some Department of Ecology grant funding that's being carried forward. Next slide. We'll get into our significant expenditure carry forwards. In the general fund, we're carrying forward a variety of items. We've got capital restricted monies, city clerk professional services, some consulting, training, the land sale costs that ties back to that revenue. There are costs that go with that. In the street fund, we're carrying forward the unspent pavement maintenance funds from last year that will carry forward to be reallocated this year or in future years. The police fund, we have, they've requested carry forward of the 2022 officer credit monies and some monies saved in the police budget to be used for additional overtime and COO ramp-up costs. And then the jail savings from 2022 was carried forward, is requesting carry forward for the levy election costs. And then remaining in swim fund, there's some consulting and training and equipment. And in fleet, there was a replacement. It's a Kubota utility vehicle to replace one of the Gators. It was ordered last year but has not come in yet, so we will be paying for that this year. Next slide. The IT department has the most significant list of carry forward, so I always break them out onto their own slide. Yes, ma'am.
I just like to interrupt because I want to give the council members, and it's hard for me to see who maybe have a question before we get to the end. And maybe we can just break it up and you like carry
After
forwards
each
and
one?
then other ones and give council members, make sure we got any questions. And council member Wood, is he able to raise his hand for you online? If not, Councilmember Wood, if you just raise your hand on screen, I'll try to catch.
He's got it.
It's like he
It
does.
is.
Okay, and, okay, so just real quick, with that in mind, if anybody has any questions up to date?
I do.
Okay, Councilmember Keel?
Great, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I was just thinking about that because it's a long list. I was like, oh,
Right.
I got to write that one down because I got to go back to the very beginning. So, and it's about the 210K. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. It sounds like we're talking about carry forward, right? And then it sounded like the 210K was an addition. So how can, if it's an
We're-
addition, how can it be a carry forward?
We're carrying forward $40,000, which was originally budgeted, and they are requesting an increase to that of another $210,000.
So the carry forward is 40, so I should be looking at
Carry
40.
forward is 40,
and
and
then
they've
now the-
requested an additional 210.
So, okay, so
Which is a
250
new
altogether.
adjustment.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Councilmember Wood, do you have any questions, comments? Okay, thank you. I do, and on the levy election cost from the jail savings, was that election cost at $160,000?
The election cost was $94,661.
So what was the 1/6? Oh, excuse me, I'm on the wrong line. My bad. So 94, okay.
Yeah.
And that was the election cost?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move forward.
Okay, so IT carry forwards, they are proposing carrying forward $1,333,000 in expenditures for use in 2023. It includes funding for minor software packages, hardware components that weren't able to be purchased last year that they'll be doing this year, some IT services costs, the deferred staff training that they weren't able to get to last year with all their projects. There's some consulting and deferred equipment and repair and maintenance services, the deferred hardware purchases, deferred software purchases. That one's $380,000. Will be that one includes $280,000 for the finance software replacement, which did go out for RFP last week, and then $100,000 for a records management system, and then some remaining ARPA funding for hardware and security items.
Okay, Councilmember Gill.
Great, thank you. So I'm sure you have that list somewhere, the deferred hardware, and you enumerated some of those things just now, but those are some big numbers. I would just be interested at some time later if you could just, if I had an email that had all those dollars
More of a
broken
breakdown.
out.
I can
Yeah.
get Glenn to provide that,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. For all of these, especially those bigger numbers, the 374, all that stuff. Okay. Thank you.
If you can, email that to the rest of the
I would
council.
just to everyone.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else. Okay, with that, I do want to go back, since we're on the same page, way on top, Town Center and land sale, lot 11 at 35th, Town Center lands. Now, I know that sale has not gone through.
Correct.
So why would it be a carry forward? So if that is not revenue?
We originally budgeted for the revenue and then the ensuing costs for the sale and expenditures in 2022. That was the original schedule. It hasn't happened yet. They expect it to happen this year, so we're just having the budget so we can budget the revenue and the cost of the sale.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can move on.
Okay, so slide number 7, we are getting into adjustments, just adjustments to the budget. As you know, we adopted this budget in 2022, and so we've made some changes on the revenue side to increase sales tax. Those funds are still tracking above what we've been budgeting the last couple of years. We've got some increased franchise fees, and then our investment interest, as we've talked about in the last couple finance committee meetings, has bounced back after very low percentages, so we're increasing that by $1.2 million. In the street fund, we're making adjustments for TBD fees, sewer franchise, and sewer utility based on some historical data and where the numbers are coming in. And then the same thing in the police fund for water utility tax. As you know, those were implemented more recently, so now we have some full years of data to try and perfect those projections. The remaining revenue adjustments are interfund transfers related to CIP project carry forwards and adjustments to beginning fund balances. Does anyone have any questions on revenue adjustments before I go to expenditure?
It doesn't look like anyone except for me. And I might have just, because I was looking at a little bit some other things while you were reporting, but on police, you had decreased water utility tax. I'm kind of not there. What does it say, police on decreased water utility?
We're right at the bottom of the list under the revenue adjustments. It's $27,500. That one was implemented about a year and a half ago, and we did our best guess estimates for revenue projections, and we've had a full year come in, so we budgeted that one a little bit high, so we're just getting it in line so that also in our forecast, those numbers don't overinflate our ending fund balances, so we really know what we have.
Oh, you're saying that the police and decreased water utility tax are two different things?
It's the police fund. What's in front of it is police fund. All the water utility tax goes into the police fund.
Oh, it does, excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, that's the part,
Yeah.
okay. How come the water utility tax goes into the police fund?
That was the way it was broke down when council approved it, if I remember right.
that's right.
Sewer,
Excuse
sewer
me.
went to streets,
Yes.
water went to
I've always get
police. Yep,
confused about how we broke that down.
Yep.
Thank you for that reminder.
you bet.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
we're all good.
Next slide is our expenditure adjustments. Expenditure adjustments by fund are as follows. In the general fund, we have a variety of changes reflected in city council, HR, elections, and the events budgets totaling $106,000. The street fund increased to traffic control professional services and electricity costs totaling $20,000. In the police fund, we're an increase to the court cost for prosecutor, some equipment, and a hearing examiner increase totaling $40,300. That hearing examiner cost is for animal control. There was previously no budget, and so we wanted to make sure that was there should the need arise. In the swim fund, they've got some increases to minor equipment and rental costs totaling $39,000. Fleet, we've increased our fuel costs $22,000. And in property management, they made changes to repairs and electricity costs totaling $12,517.
Very good.
Okay. Next slide is our one-time monies. As we reported at the retreat, in the general fund, we saw unexpected revenues and expenditure savings in 2022 totaling $3.9 million. The carry forward amounts and cost adjustments included in the budget request totaled $2.8 million, leaving $1,091,000 and some change in one-time monies. The 2021 one-time monies of $1.1 million remained unappropriated. At the council retreat, council suggested appropriating $65,000 for communications content creator and $250,000 for possible recreation expenses, and putting the remaining $1.8 million in the council contingency fund for future use. And I've listed all of that in a chart for you. So what that leaves is, again, $1.877717 in a contingency fund for a future appropriation.
Very good.
Okay, next slide. The financial forecast was updated to include all of these adjustments, and all existing services and legal and contractual obligations can be met with existing revenues through the biennium. And as you see, most funds stay solvent through 2032, with the exception of the street fund, which begins to go negative in 2032. And I know council will be discussing that in future meetings. Next slide. So that concludes my report, and if you have any additional questions, I'm here.
Any questions, Council?
Thank you.
Councilmember Wood, you're fine?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the comprehensive, item number 9, comprehensive plan update with staff Kevin Brisky and I believe the consultant, city consultant.
Good guy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa and council members. Kenneth George, Senior Planner in the Community and Economic Development Department. Thankfully, I do get to be brief tonight. I know you heard me at length when we discussed the ADUs, but tonight I'm just here to introduce our consultant who we've hired to work on our comprehensive plan update, or we've been titled it our 2024 comprehensive plan update because that's when it's due to be completed. And we've hired LEC. They've been doing a lot of great work on the back end, so they're here this evening to give you a little bit of a check-in and an update and a brief overview of what we've done so far and what we can see to come next. So I'll introduce Clay White here.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Great. Thank you. My name is Clay White. For the record, I'm the Director of Planning with LDC. We actually got to work with the city on the Housing Action Toolkit, but it was during a time where we didn't have meetings like this in person. So thankful to be here tonight in person and be at the City of University Place. It's on a night like this, like where else would you rather be? So it's amazing. So yes, we're going to do a little update on the comprehensive plan update. Know that I'm here to answer any questions that you have. If I can't answer a question that you have, I will get you the answer. So we'll just kind of walk through some steps tonight. We can probably go to the next slide. So we've just got a few goals for tonight. I'd like to give the council members an overview of project goals and a little bit of an update of kind of the Growth Management Act and how it works through comprehensive planning. An overview of recent state laws that have changed that will impact kind of planning moving forward. So I know you've received a little bit of a briefing on that. We're going to continue that conversation tonight, and then I'm sure we'll be coming back to you to kind of think about the policy approach to some of these state law changes. And then that would translate eventually into development regulations at some point in the future. I'd like to share an update on the public involvement plan and priorities and strategies for public engagement. So we're working with another firm, Triangle and Associates. They've put together the draft final public engagement plan. They've talked to the Planning Commission. So we just want to have a bit of a conversation and get some feedback on some questions that we have as we begin to engage the public on this important conversation as the city plans from 2024 to 2044. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. So just a little bit of an update. This is just a little bit of an overview of the Growth Management Act. Just to kind of like lay that foundation for why are we doing this and what does it mean and what are all the pieces to it, so we can go to the next slide. So first, just to kind of explain that there's all of these pieces that kind of work all together. So some of you may be going to meetings at PCSC or at Puget Sound Regional Council or even all the work at Sound Transit. I mean, it all feeds into this planning process. But it's a bit sequential. And there's kind of two primary pieces to it. So the first is planning for growth is a bottoms-up process. So there's a lot of discretion that the city has, but there's a lot of constructs at the state and regional level. So we have the Growth Management Act, which kind of sets that framework. We'll talk about it tonight, but it sets kind of these goals under the state law and things that you're required to plan for. The four-county region, King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap, then have this additional kind of planning component, and that's with Puget Sound Regional Council. So through Puget Sound Regional Council, we have things like Vision 2050, which sets regional policies. And the thought process is if we're working together and coordinating on transportation planning or planning for people and jobs, you're probably going to get to that finish line if we're all not doing our individual pieces and not communicating. So there's policies that are set there. And then you have the countywide planning policies. So those are the policies between Pierce County and all the cities in the county. And you're planning for shared issues on economic development and people and housing and kind of shared goals. Countywide planning policies are also used to facilitate a conversation on how you allocate who's planning for how much growth and people and jobs. So you're working through that very complicated process. And then you get to the University Place Comprehensive Plan. And of course, I think one of the important things to think about when you're setting policy is I always think about, like, what does this mean when you implement it? Because policies are meant to be implemented through, a lot of times it may be development regulations or it may be programs, but it should be able to, when you read a policy, know, like, that's our action plan. It's your action plan for the next 20 years. But you kind of have two pieces here. So one kind of goal is you have this requirement to be consistent with kind of changes to the Growth Management Act. And then you also have this piece where you're looking to be consistent with that regional vision. So there's some overlaps, but they also have their specific, these kind of different processes as well. They work pretty well together, but we've got to be mindful of kind of both pieces. Go to the next slide. So the Growth Management Act was enacted in 1990, and it provides that framework for state and regional growth. So this is the law that requires you to have a comprehensive plan. And then recently, a couple of years ago, it changed back to a 10-year update. So you're updating this plan every 10 years. There is some new state law provisions that were passed 2 years ago that require there to be a 5-year check-in, so it'll kind of be an implementation check-in. And then, of course, you're looking out 20 years. And again, emphasizing, I've always held this to be pretty dear, is that this is intended to be a bottoms-up process. So while you have these state laws that give you that construct for growth, I mean, you really have to, each individual city is different. And you have different goals and vision, and that's why we do public engagement. So be thinking about, how do you take these laws, but then implement them in a way that's the best for your community. So thinking about that proactively and early in these processes is really important. Part of the reason I'm here tonight. We can go to the next slide. So the Growth Management Act has 14 goals, and you'll see these kind of range to a whole bunch of different things. This would be things from in the late 80s, there was a large concern about sprawl into rural areas and farms and forests, and it talks about reasonable transportation and affordable housing, permit processing and private property rights. So it has all this mix of kind of high-level goals. Those goals, like a policy, they have to be implemented. So how are they implemented? Well, there's a number of laws that implement these goals. So like for permit processing, there's a completely different statute that kind of guides how permits are processed and the timelines and how you get through multiple permits in a process, things that the planning office is dealing with on a daily basis. Other pieces of the growth management are implemented through these elements that you have to have within your comprehensive plan. And we can go to the next slide. Could we go to the next slide, please?
Just 1 second, we're having just a quick technical difficulty.
No worries at all.
It's one of those nights.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, it's Ed.
That's all right. We can keep going. So we have these goals, and then they're implemented into your comprehensive plan, and you have different elements of your plan. Things like land use, where you're planning for jobs and housing, and you have an environment chapter, and you're looking at economic development and parks and capital facilities and utilities to make sure that you can provide the services when the growth comes. And they all work together. And so, one of the important things is you're putting your comprehensive plan together, just making sure that you understand the connection between the policies that you're setting and your capital facilities element and what you're planning for in housing and how all of those things interconnect. Great, I think we can go on to the next slide. So this is your comprehensive plan. You have a chapter called community character. That's not something you're required to. That's great, though. You should have a chapter like community character. So some of these pieces are required, and then other pieces are that way that you're making your comprehensive plan yours. So you can take on that kind of that unique look and feel. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of Growth Management Act, it is an update. It's not you're not writing a brand new plan. So there's some key components when you're updating a comprehensive plan. The first is that you're required to update your plan consistent with state law changes since your last update. And we've had a lot of those, so that's why this update may be bigger than some updates. You're also looking at case law that's occurred. At least in my view, case law is much less than it used to be in terms of land use because the courts have worked through so many issues in the first 30 years of Growth Management Act. You're also having to conduct best available science for your critical areas ordinance, so that has to be looked at. And for this update, the key issues are kind of housing and land use. And then, of course, we've got a new climate bill, which will have to be acted on at some point as well. So we'll kind of walk through the timeline of that tonight. Next slide. So we've kind of talked about the state requirements, so we'll talk just a little bit about the regional and the countywide requirements. Next slide. So first we've got Puget Sound Regional Council. So we've kind of talked about how you have these state laws and then you have the regional vision. And there's some overlap, but there's also, you're looking at needing to have policies that implement that regional vision. My personal thought is you know, you have countywide planning policies that implement the regional vision. If you're implementing your countywide planning policies, you're probably pretty close to getting there. But Vision 2050's multi-county planning policies and regional growth strategy kind of guide that growth for the 4 counties. And then the multi-county planning policy, regional growth strategy are implemented through the CPPs. You can go to the next slide. And, you know, kind of big picture, between 2017 and 2050, you know, the region's expecting 1.8 million more people and 1.2 million jobs. And of course, one of the kind of foundational elements of Growth Management Act is that, you know, is limiting expansions of urban growth areas into rural areas. And so you think about, like, that's a lot of people that are moving in the same geographical area. I mean, the area is changing, and it's going to have a wide impact. In terms of regional policies, kind of consistently, the policy areas that you're going to look at are things like climate, environmental health disparities, equity, like equity in housing, and then housing and housing displacement. There's a lot of parallels between the policy changes in Vision 2050 and the Growth Management Act. I mean, I don't see that there's a lot of areas at the regional level that are like a specifically different topic that isn't addressed in state law. So there's some pretty common elements. I'd say the one thing Vision doesn't touch on quite as much is some of the housing changes to state laws, because Vision 2050 was adopted prior to House Bill 1220 and 1110 and 1337. And then of course, as a regional center, University Place has gets a larger share of the growth and jobs and the planning requirements. And I know you're going to get a presentation tonight because you're constantly planning, especially for your downtown. So that's a big piece of that as well. Next slide. So again, those countywide planning policies implement that regional vision. So you have new countywide planning policies that have been updated. And as part of our early work, like part of the early work for your comprehensive plan is like setting existing conditions. So part of the work that we've done so far is to do a policy gap analysis where we've analyzed your current comprehensive plan and then changes to state laws and regional policies, and then outlined and discovered here are the topical areas where we probably need to address in policy updates. So we've kind of pulled those out, and then we know those are the things that we're going to have to focus on. Again, it's always pretty clear because it's climate and it's housing and it's displacement and some equity issues. So those are pretty standard across the region of things that you're going to have to touch on. I think we can move on to the next slide. So let's just focus for a moment on the 2023 legislation. And I know you've had some briefings on this, so I'll keep it pretty short, but we can go to the next slide. We'll focus on 4 areas to talk about. So the first is House Bill 1220. Now, this didn't pass in 2023. It passed the year before. This made substantial changes to the housing element of the comprehensive plan. So we have all those chapters in your comprehensive plan. It really changes how you have to focus on housing. And I'll kind of, there's several pieces that have changed, but maybe here's the issue that's changed the most. So right now, we've done a lot of our land capacity analysis work for the city, and that's really understanding how much growth are you planning for and how much capacity to accommodate that growth you already have. So you can figure out if there's a gap, then you'd have to like upzone areas, or you'd have to figure out ways to accommodate more growth. You have enough capacity to accommodate that growth target out to 2044. And you're continuing to look at policy and changes that would be opening up things for more jobs. So you have the capacity. What 1220 did though, is it really made the housing element more granular. So instead of like planning to have the capacity to accommodate a certain number of households or people, it's really broken it down where there's of planning for people and jobs at different income bands. So it's saying there's a housing need of people at different area median incomes. So it's delegating the housing that you're going to have to plan for in different buckets. And it also has gotten more granular about the types of housing to plan for as well. So whereas maybe before it had language about providing for a variety of housing types, now it's really very specific about providing for duplexes and triplexes and middle housing and all of these types of housing. So it's just a greater responsibility to do a bit more work. Now, the city doesn't build houses. You provide the zoning and the regulations to allow it to happen. So as we work through this process with you, especially as you're providing for capacity for housing types at lower income levels, I mean, that's not market available. There has to be some way of it getting built. Personally, my interpretation of the way the law is constructed is, I mean, you just have to have the one is provide capacity for certain types of housing. Two is at least provide programs that would allow it to possibly be built. Other than that, I think that's where your responsibility ends. But it's very likely that jurisdictions are going to have to provide more capacity for growth than their growth target, because you have to provide it for all these different housing types. So it's not going to equal 100%. Does that hopefully that makes sense. House Bill, the Middle Housing Bill, 1110. Go through this real briefly. So this bill requires University Place to allow 2 dwelling units on every lot. In areas where if you provide affordable housing, it would require 4 units on every single family lot. It does provide limitations on areas where you can restrict that. So I mean, there's a lot of components to the bill, but it is a change of kind of how the city regulates housing. In some ways, it gets away from like a density component because it's more like a use. Like if a zone allows 4 dwelling units per acre, but now some of these state laws are saying, but you also have to allow these other uses. So as part of this project, this bill has to be implemented 6 months after the comprehensive plan update, so in June of 2025. I think it would be smart as part of this project to at least do the policy basis so that maybe you implement the regulations right after this project, but to have to go back and update the policies again, so we'll probably come back with some options on how you might want to approach this bill through policy, and then you could come back on the code. For House Bill 1337, this is the one that requires allowing 2 accessory dwelling units on every single family lot. Again, there's some limitations in the bill, and there's quite a bit, like you can't. There's some limitation on how much you can limit size or height, and how much you can apply, impact fees and improvements and that kind of thing. But what we're working through now is I think there's some way these bills can work together as well. But obviously this is a big change. The bill does talk about how you can allow them, so you can allow them to both be attached or one detached and one attached. So also have to see how that works with your city and how the built-out environment is. Certainly there's some ways to maneuver through areas because I know you have some unsewered areas. There's areas with critical areas and other factors. So we'll have to take a look at this bill and then kind of say, like, how does that apply to the city of University Place? What options do you have, and what approach do you want to take towards implementation? So we do that right. I just let you know, every city, especially these 2024 jurisdictions, they're all trying to figure these things out right now because all of these bills just passed. So there's a bit of a learning curve, but we're working really hard to make sure that you're set up for success as part of this process. And then finally, just the climate change and resilient element. This legislation passed this last session. It's not required to be implemented by University Place till 2029. That'll be part of the 5-year update, and you'll also get grant resources when that comes through. There's a requirement in growth management whenever they add a new or change a modifying element. If they don't provide you resources 2 years before your update, then you don't have to implement it. So there is funding in the state budget. It will come. It may be wise, though, if we at least start looking at how to, if it's not another element, setting up some climate policies. You're going to have to do that some to be consistent with regional policies, but it may be a good idea to at least get the formation so when you do have to do the work, it's not like trying to extract climate policies from all of your other environmental policies. So we might want to just see how we could start that approach now, and it'll lessen work in the future.
Did they put adequate in front of the word funding?
Yeah, I'm not, actually, we're working with some 2025 jurisdictions that are getting funding, and I don't know exactly what the formula is, but I think it should be a good amount. But is it, I mean, it's never usually typically enough. Although I think that as planners, there was 20 years where there were no grants for any planning work, and now at least there's over $10 million for the biennium for grants to cities and counties to do their comprehensive plan. So better than we were, probably never enough to actually do the work that you want to do. So that'll be upcoming as well. I think we can move on to the next slide.
Before you do,
Yes.
Mr. White, thank you, Councilmember Gill. It's a lot of information. I would want to give the council members a chance to just clarify something, make a comment, or ask something, just to kind of keep up with all this.
Yes.
So, thank you. And so any other council members?
I'm just,
Okay, Councilmember Gillespie?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm tracking all the things that you're saying, and I'm understanding and doing the, north-south head shake on that. And I like putting in policy so that we don't have to backtrack and do that work, because that's the harder, one to lift, rather than the technical components coming out of that. So I'll be very interested in doing that piece component to it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wood? Oh, I see your hand up. I can see that little bitty yellow hand. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a few comments. I'm going to start with my grumpy one first. The bottom up is a nice thought, and I really appreciate that's where you want to go with this. Though I will, that's what we did last time is my understanding, yet it didn't prevent the state from coming in and dumping a whole bunch of new regulations on us despite our issues with them. A lot of it just came top down, as you're well aware. And so what I'd be interested in is understanding where it is we have left as a city, the gaps that we can still make a difference. Second point, I think we need to focus on, especially in the planning phase, more of a partnership with the private sector who actually builds this housing. As you pointed out, we don't build, we set codes. Part of the reason I believe the state felt the pressure to put in all these regulations is because not enough housing was getting built. And it wasn't a code problem. We had more than enough space in our city to add a whole bunch of ADUs and do other things in the state, but the houses aren't getting built. And so the state felt obligated, I think, to do this, and I think we'll see that cycle again if we don't partnership with the private sector now and figure out why they're not building housing to meet the demand. And then third, this is a personal goal for me. We had a briefing about a month or two ago about ratios of housing ownership versus rental in our city, and I'd like us to preserve the goal of keeping that ratio. I don't want, as our land becomes more restricted, because we just don't have a whole lot of open space to build left. I don't want our ratio of rental to ownership increasing. I would like to have people have the opportunity to own throughout this process. And then finally, I know you were talking about placeholders for climate change. We know there's areas right now that we need to look at. One is our coastal neighborhoods, and the other one is our neighborhoods that are along Chambers Creek that have the urban-wildland interface. Both those communities have an increased risk with climate change, and I would not want to just do a placeholder, but I'd actually like to put something substantive in there sooner rather than later. And that concludes my comments. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Great.
Go forward.
And just respond to that. Oh,
Oh, my
No,
apologies.
go ahead and respond, and then I'll
Okay.
take my
Okay.
yeah, so just in terms of home ownership, I do know that the way that 1337, 1110 are structured is it does require the allowance to be able to condo those units or to subdivide them as well. So, I mean, there's an area where we're going to talk a little bit more about some options for sale housing or attached housing that could be built, but that's going to provide a home ownership option. That may not be something that you'd rather have them be for family, or that they're be required to live in the unit, the homeowner, but that may be another option for home ownership that's more affordable than typical homes.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for all this information. It's helpful for me, and as I can see from my colleagues as well. And I want to pick up on what Councilman Wood said, because I have the same issue, and that is we don't build housing, right? And it just it feels like, we're put in a spot that, we're on the hook to not only just change the codes, but actually make sure the housing gets built, right? I mean, and so in your circle of conversations with all of the folks that do the planning and with, the state, has that conversation, is that thought kind of come up? How do you help cities, or how do you address the legislature that when you say, look, cities don't build housing? Has that come up? What's that conversation like, if it has?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's only so much the city can do. You can provide the zoning, and you can provide permit processes that work, and things that can get you through that process. And then there's where the piece that has to be market available. So I mean, I think one of the things is making sure that your regulations make market sense, so that, and if you have zones that have densities that don't quite work with the type of housing you're trying to build, that housing won't get built. I mean, so there are some things that you can do. At that point, it's the market that's going to dictate, when a property would redevelop or develop. And so part of being in proactive and planning is to make sure you have those regulations and the zoning in place at the time when it becomes market available. So if you zone something to try to capture, more rental housing like you've picked up, you don't know if that's going to get built next year. It's going to be 3 or 5 years from now. But you've put all the tools that you can in place. So I think that that's why they recognize you can create the capacity, but the two things have to work really well together.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think, Mayor Pro Tem and Mr. White, I think what seems would work in the future is the conversation around what's going to really drive the market, right? I mean, us changing codes helps a little bit, and I think we're doing, all 281 cities in the state are doing that. What, in my view, the legislature is missing is there are things that they should be doing to help drive the market. Like, for example, lighten up on the taxes. If you help builders let things pencil, then they will build stuff. I mean, they're not going to build things to lose money.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not going to happen. So there are a lot of things around fees and taxes and regulations. I mean, instead of slowing down the regulations, we're getting more regulations from the state, and those regulations add to the cost. And so that's the kind of conversation that that we all need to have. You in your play, all of us, as opposed to, oh, they got more regulations, so how do we, do that? I mean, and I get we got to do planning, but if that's all we focus on, we're never going to get there. And so, anyway, I'm sure you can feel the frustration in my voice, and this is more just for the ether rather than for you. But it's my turn to talk, and so it's frustrating, because we're focusing on the wrong thing, in my view. And the last thing I would say is, and maybe this is something you can help me with too. This is actually a real question. When we do all this stuff, with these latest bills that we have, especially like 1337, right, and even 1220, the legislature is saying they think it's going to drive, housing, to increase. I'm curious as if over a few years, will we take a look at the data and take a look at what has changed or has not changed, and then fold that back into the planning to say, hey, we tried these 8 things, and now 5 years later we're looking at the data, or 2 years later we're looking at the data. Did it help or did it not? Yeah. And then, is there any thought about that, or is there anything around that happening?
Yeah, I think that depending on the bill, they're going to work better in some places than others. So, in areas where you have this higher pressure for growth, you may see a single-family residence that would get converted, and they might put 4 units on that property. In other areas, that's not going to make sense to buy a home for $1.5 million to put 4 units on. I think the ADUs could work pretty well. I think it's going to depend on how cities and counties in urban areas construct their regulations. It also depends if you have CC&Rs that restrict them. It depends on how large your lot sizes are, if they could facilitate ADUs. It depends on the infrastructure that you have, and can it actually support the addition of those units. So I think in some areas, some of these are going to work really well, especially if jurisdictions are really receptive to them. In other areas, it really just depends on the zone and the lots and that kind of thing. I mean, I think that the ADU provisions could actually work pretty well in a lot of communities to provide more affordable housing types and provide more housing options. I think when you're looking at conversion of existing homes into another housing, I think that's going to be more closer to job centers. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. If you can move forward.
Yes, okay, we can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the public involvement plan. So this is Triangle Associates that's been working with us on this, and we can go one more forward. So we're close to being complete with our development of our public involvement plan. One more. Perfect, thank you. So Triangle completed some key informative interviews up front to lay the foundation for the approach towards public involvement. We've drafted the plan, we've had a workshop, we've met with the Planning Commission, and we're here with you tonight just to kind of go through the feedback that we got from the Planning Commission so that we can really start gearing up, connecting with the community. Next slide. So the feedback from the Planning Commission really focused on that the goal should be to gain tangible feedback on aspects of the comprehensive plan that can really be truly shaped by public input. And part of what I'm hearing that too is making sure that we're hearing from all segments of the community so that we can provide all of you really good information so that you can make informed decisions. And so a lot of times it's not here, but you may hear from the people that attend these meetings, but there's a lot of people that are part of your community that maybe work in the evenings or they have young families, and it's nice to have the online option now where people can communicate, but we want to make sure that we're matching up the really important issues with a wide swath of the community so we can bring that feedback to all of you, and then it helps you frame up your policy decisions. And then we want to make sure we're building relationship and trust with not just residents, but organizations as well. Go ahead, that's great. You were anticipating me saying next slide. That's fantastic. So we're looking, I think one of the ways we're trying to match up the budget with making sure that we're doing the right engagement at the right times on the right issues. So, what works when you have like your draft comprehensive plan out is not the same as you're trying to get on the final comprehensive plan. But we're looking at doing things like online surveys. These can be quick surveys people could take. Live surveys, so we could be doing tabling with paper surveys at community events. Not everybody is working with technology, making sure that we can reach all segments of the community. And then community sessions. So this could be presenting and meeting people where they are. So that's, community-based organizations and going to events. And public involvement is part of the Growth Management Act. Having a plan, broad outreach is really one of the foundational elements of Growth Management Act. But it's changed so much in the last 10 years. Just as a planner, it used to be, we're holding a meeting at this time, and if you want to be involved, you come to that meeting. Or you have 30 days to comment on a 700-page document, and if you don't, then you must not care what's happening here. And I think it's really shifted to meeting people where they are and knowing that, if we can go to them and to, those that are impacted by land use decisions but aren't necessarily at the table when they occur, or meeting families where they are, or going to events and getting information, then we're going to hear what the community really wants from the plan. Also breaking down these really complex, we use so many acronyms and all these little steps, but people to be able to engage, they don't have to know all of those things. It's our job to take what they're providing and translate that into sound policies that all of you can consider. So, next slide. So the priority elements for public engagement. So, we're looking at a lot of areas, but trying to focus on those things that might be most important. What we heard from the Planning Commission would be land use and housing, transportation and community character. So that land use and housing are all these new bills and kind of the impacts, planning for more growth, planning for jobs. The transportation is hearing that, people are concerned with, as we grow, I'm sure you hear it all the time, you don't have to inform you of this, of just the impacts on people's commutes or just, and they want to just maybe gauging what could the city be doing to be mitigating for those impacts as you're growing. And then community character really gets down to how can you implement all these things in a way that's specific to University Place and meet your goals. All right, we can go to the next slide. And this is kind of wrap it up. Did we miss a slide? Yeah, there we go. Okay, you go ahead and move that one forward. You can hit it 4 times there. It'll kind of pop up. Okay, so what information I would like to get for our engagement consultants is we're kind of talking about land use and housing and transportation and community character and thinking about if we're going to engage the community with some short surveys, some kind of key questions that we may ask. So in terms of land use, where would you like to see more dense housing in University Place? Things like triplexes or fourplexes. As part of the housing toolkit, we had talked about possibility of looking at an R3 zoning district. So you talked about housing getting built. One of the observations during the toolkit was that you allow middle housing or attached housing, but there really isn't a zone where the density range is specific to that housing type. There's ones that are lower, like up to 9 dwelling units per acre, I think. But that's still a single-family detached density. So, I mean, if a developer has the ability to build 3 homes and he can build a triplex or 3 single-family detached homes, he's going to build 3 single-family detached homes. That's where the market's going to drive that build. So, if you were going to look at more middle housing, asking where would you like to see it? Sometimes you'll get feedback from folks that understand that maybe that's like your first home, where it used to be that small house you bought. My first house was 1,000 square feet. Those homes don't exist anymore. I mean, they're either very, very expensive or they've been repurposed for a larger home. So that starter home sometimes is buying a unit in a triplex. For housing, what types of housing we'd like to see more of in University Place? So we can kind of match that with the new state laws that have happened. And looking at transportation, how would you like University Place to help reduce traffic?
Before?
Oh,
Let
yes.
him finish? Okay, that's all right, go ahead.
And then kind of thinking about just getting on the community character of maybe getting some ranking questions where you could kind of, people that wanted to be involved could rank what's important to them. So for each one of these, just, opening it up, if you have any feedback or if there's other things you think we should be thinking about or framing up for the public on these important topics, you can frame that up tonight, or you can think about it and certainly pass that information to any of us, and we'll make sure to include it.
We do have a council member that wants to ask you something, and Councilmember Belisi.
Thank you, Mr. White, for your presentation, particularly on the public engagement piece. Basically, the comp plan, all we're doing is making updates to what's already existing. But I think what the problem is that our community has forgotten what the comp plan is and how it has progressed to what it is. So if you're doing any outreach pieces that engage our citizens directly, not developers, but our citizens, I think it's important that they be provided with a visual of how the comp plan has evolved over time due to legislative actions that were beyond our control. So that they can understand. I think the outreach to the public is more of an education piece than it is asking them, would they like to see more dense housing? Because I can tell you the outcry will be no. They don't want it. They want it out. They're already upset with the density that's occurred over the last 5 years with this mixed use here, and they're upset with the traffic implications of this without understanding that this dense housing was in the comp plan for 15 plus years. So I would really recommend that you look at using the engagement piece to the public as more of an education piece. Community character is something that can be adjusted and we have control over and can be updated in the comp plan, but as far as the density and the land use, we don't have control over it. I think the public needs to be aware that based on current legislation that's come out of Olympia, what they think their single-family neighborhood, if they're not living in an HOA that restricts any dwelling units, is going to change.
That's right.
Our older section of town, the 27th Street District, you know, those are older homes, they're not covered by HOA, they have nice property in there, that will be densified. And as a result of that densification, there's going to be transportation implications because of it. And for somebody that lives in that area to say, I don't want densification, I don't want triplexes and quadplexes, it's a moot point at this point. We're mandated to have it happen. The question could be on how do we maintain the character in those areas when the densification comes? What kind of design standards potentially that we have control over that we can implement? But the questions of land use, where do you want more densification? I'll guarantee you that those that do show up will show up in mass saying we don't want any more.
Sure.
So I think showing them how the progression has happened and what we've planned for and what's actually occurred are two different realities, and that indeed we have been planning for this growth that we've been experiencing for the last 5 years. And how much more potential growth do we really have, given that we're pretty well built out? So showing them where the densification could potentially happen for redevelopment, I think they'd be surprised to see that redevelopment would occur more on our major arterials and less so in the residential neighborhoods, with the exception of triplexes or quadplexes coming in. But again, that's going to happen, I think, in an older part of town. It's not happening in the southern part where our HOAs are. So doing that education piece, I think, would be extremely helpful.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I would like to have some involvement with the development community to find out what is keeping them from coming into UP. Will these new zoning, these new laws from the state legislature open it up for them? Can we expect major development? If not, the education piece for us would be what regulations are causing them to slow down or not attempt to do the redevelopment. And then for us to look, is it legislation or regulations on our part, or is it on the state level part where we can point the finger at somebody else and say, look, we're trying, we've got our comp plan in place, we've done everything you've asked us for, it's not happening because of X, Y, Z. Not that I think we want to really advocate for the densification, but at least have it in our back pocket to say, we've done everything that we can, but these are the obstacles that we'd like you to keep your hands off of, but, you know.
May I drill down on one piece, because this is great feedback. So on the land use, the triplexes and duplexes, that would be more of an optional change. I don't think you have to do that for GMA, because that's not, but on the places where the 1337 or 1110, do you think it'd be valuable to get some like rank prioritization of where you do control things like design and kind of, kind of how they're built and that kind of stuff, of getting kind of ranks, so that would help inform some policy choices?
I think that would be far more helpful. But yeah, our community will come out and storm, and then they think once they have provided this input that nothing is going to change, and then their neighbor comes in and sells their house to a developer, and all of a sudden we go from an affordable older home to triplexes or fourplexes on the lot, and then their neighbor gets enraged. We have this comp plan, and this is what we said at the meeting, and they're not listening to us. So I'm thinking that, yes, some input, but it needs to be understood that we have no control over it.
Education is important.
Yeah, and that what's driving it is the legislation we're getting from the state and the federal government in regards to anticipating this growth.
Okay,
Thank you.
super.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I concur wholeheartedly with Councilmember Felici, so I'm not going to repeat anything she says. I'm just going to add on that what is really essential is our community character. I think they're going to be very fearful of the densification, but if there is a tempered down that your community, you have control about that. What do you want to see to preserve your community character? After all, that's what everybody came into University Place for, is the character of our city, and they don't want to see that change, the value of the schools, and I'd say family-centric, a lot of children, open space would be important. How are they going to de-stress after a hard day? They're coming home to their sanctuary to preserve some of those things. I think that will be a high interest to a lot of people in our community that value the trees and the green spaces that we do have currently in Chambers Bay. People are more interested in going outdoors and enjoying that environment, how to keep our air quality healthy, with the densification and the traffic congestion. You can have beautiful sidewalks, but if it's unhealthy to walk them because of the traffic, then that would be a concern too. So I think focusing on that component, to temper some of the fear of things that the city really doesn't have control over, and be as visual as you can, not hypothetical, but visual. So here's us today, here's us under these new bills, what the possibilities are. However, if that comes to reality, here's how we live and still have a high quality life as we're enjoying our life today.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Keel.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think this is, we've been hanging out way too long. It's been like 12 years for me, and because what you both just said is the nexus of what I wanted to say. So ditto on the training piece, and understanding to the citizens of how all these things are coming down to us vis-a-vis legislation and all that, and it's kind of out of our control, because we've heard it. The city council's doing this, and why is the city council doing that? And it's like,
They don't listen.
we're being told to, because it's the law, and so that education piece. And to pick up on what Councilmember McCluskey was talking about as far as setting up what things look like, the thought I had was painting a picture of around different scenarios, right? Again, to help with the education. For example, if this area of town changes to this zoning and we get this type of housing, then here's what the impact is going to be, to land use, to transportation, and to community character, right? And so that you start painting these vignettes of what things look like, and then maybe say, here's some possible maybe solutions to kind of help mitigate that. Maybe, around, talking to the legislature, saying, hey, let's push back a little bit here, or maybe it's, well, if we get a lot of people here, it's really going to mess up traffic, and the roads are going to be packed. So, do we bring work closer to UP? Is it, more people need to, work from home online? What do we have Sound Transit for? And we can bring light rail like right outside my door. I mean, all that kind of stuff would be something that would help in the education piece, so people can get the aha.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'll start by also, with everybody else, totally agree with the other council members on we got to focus on public education as well as engagement. There's this last legislative session introduced a whole lot of complexity to the process, and I think helping people understand what happened and what our impacts are would be very helpful for all of us, especially as we then start asking questions that are meaningful. We probably should focus on a few key message points, totally open to what they could be, but as this gets pretty complex, especially when you start talking about things like bus rapid transit and how it changed zoning and all that kind of stuff. But focusing on that public education is absolutely essential. Okay, enough said on that. A couple other things. The questions we ask are going to set expectations. And so, like Councilmember Belisi pointed out, where would you like to see dense housing? Well, they're going to come back and say we don't, and the expectation is that we aren't going to. So we can't ask that question. Same thing under transportation. How would you like University Place to help reduce traffic? Well, if we're trying to increase density, by definition, traffic is going to increase.
Right.
So maybe the question should better be framed as, how would you like University Place to help manage traffic flow? Or something like that, because if we say, how can we help reduce traffic, and then we don't reduce traffic, again, council isn't listening to us, nobody cares, and you all suck. So I think really managing how we ask these questions. And then specifically, with the traffic section, other things that we could be asking is, how do you want public transportation to support University Place? For example, right now we've got a bus line that runs up and down Bridgeport, a couple other things. Is that going to be sufficient to the need in the future, especially as things start building out? Maybe getting some more engagement on that process, especially understanding, if we go to BRT, that the zoning laws change around where the BRT stops are. A second one could be alternate transportation support, everything from, do we need charging stations in UP, and if so, where do we put them? Do we want to have more bike lanes? If so, where do those go? That kind of thing. So we can start, because I think the public could engage there meaningfully and help us plan as we're going forward for that kind of stuff. And then finally, I'm not sure if this fits under our Growth Management Act or our comprehensive plan, but I think it might. Councilmember Keel mentioned something about people working from home. Maybe a question we need to ask is, well, does our broadband infrastructure support enough people working from home? Is there enough capability in that system for that to happen? If not, how do we get there? And maybe just having the public help us understand, hey, I can't get broadband at my house because I'm at the bottom of a freaking hill and there's no, it'd be helpful for us to understand that kind of information. Because the environment is changing out there and the infrastructure should be there to support. And then speaking one more of infrastructure, as you already know, parts of our city don't have sewer. Finding out which ones that don't have it might want it, or what priority. And if they're willing to pay for the connections for those kinds of things to put sewer into the neighborhoods. Because there's a lot of issues we could ask there, or questions we could ask there that I think are meaningful for the public to engage on, that would help us drive what we do over the next few years in areas we can control. And then the areas where we can't control, specifically in housing and density, or we have very little control, again, as other council members pointed out, focus on the community character aspect, and then the education aspect of why we can't stop the triplex from being built next door. Does that all make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I'm taking notes as fast as I can. I'm sure I'll watch the video again too, I know, so. But I do get this, education, and I think so I'm hearing that it would be really important for folks to be able to know what are the things that you actually can control moving forward and what are the things that you can't. Educating the public about comprehensive planning again and how it's utilized. And I kind of had this idea of the things, outline those things that you can control and those things that, where you have less discretion and making that very clear.
And update them on the regulations.
Yes.
Yeah, educate them on those.
That's great.
Well, before we move on, I will make a comment, and that is that I do agree and ditto on a lot of the things were said, but it's specifically, I think a key component to this whole thing is the education. And because we need to have the public, our citizens, really understand why the changes that are occurring from the comp plan. And the comp plan has been around, like Belisi said, for a long time. It is, much of it is requirements from the GMA to the PSRC, but there are requirements from state laws and things like that. So a lot of people lose that that aspect that we're not in charge. It's the state, their legislators, and other policymakers. What we have done, and I think we've done that really well, we attempt with the public is to have a soft landing on how this community is going to look and feel in the future. But we have no control as we, and to remind them how we have lobbied, I don't know if that's the right word, but advocated for some of this not to occur because of their concerns. So I think that's a key to make sure that they understand that. But that being said, I think as a council, as a city, this is, this involvement about the comp plan is short-lived. And what we need to do is constantly, during the next 10 years after it's adopted, to continuously find a way to do public education to remind them so that we're not starting like fresh all over again 10 years from now. So what can we put into place as a process for 10 years so that they're all like, okay, we understand, go ahead, we'll give you ideas but they're not angry. They're not upset that we're not listening. They'll understand why, what's going on. I think that's just as important.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
That's all I have for you tonight.
good. Well, thank you so much, Mr. White and George and Kevin over there. You took it easy on us. We'll move on to the next agenda item, and that is number 10. Item number 10, which is the Northeast Business District Plan. Kevin Brisky.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa and City Council. My name is Kevin Brisky with the Community and Economic Development Department. I am here this evening with Mandy Roberts with OTAC, who is the consulting group that helped us with the Northeast Business District. I'll do a quick introduction and then she has a presentation for you on the draft Northeast Business District Plan. It was kind of a good segue since we went from PSRC down to PCRC down to our comp plan, which then filters all the way down to our regional growth center, and then which then feeds into the Northeast Business District. So now we're getting into a more granular level of all of this stuff. So the Northeast Business District is part of 3 business districts that were adopted as part of our regional growth center. We have the Northeast Business District, the 27th Street Business District, and the Town Center Business District. The Regional Growth Center plan was adopted in 2017. It had a recommendation to do sub-area plans on those 3 districts. We have a comprehensive plan policy, LU 12C, that says to complete specific sub-area plans for the different districts. We kicked that off last year in the fall. We hired OTAC to take us through the process. We held multiple advisory group meetings through the fall and winter. Did some public outreach with the community surveys, held meetings with the Planning Commission, and multiple meetings with the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission held a public hearing on June 7th and passed a resolution recommending to the City Council to adopt the proposed plan. We do have some hard copies if people do, if the council would rather have that with the Exhibit B is separate right now, the market analysis, but it was also included in your packet, as well as the presentation that Mandy is about to show, which is more of an overview of the plan with some excerpts of it drawn out, and then we'll also be taking any questions during that. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Mandy Roberts.
Real quick, before she starts, and that is the members that were not here, council members that were not here, would you, City Clerk, would you make sure that they are provided with this in their inbox and let them know as well? Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Good evening. Am I coming in loud and clear? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, very good. All right. Would it be all right if I share my screen then?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you. Let's do this one. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. It is great to be with you this evening. And I look forward to giving a bit of a summary of the Northeast Business District Plan and a few highlights from the plan. And tonight, I understand we'll be taking any questions that you might have, having discussion about the plan, and that action is anticipated at a future meeting. So we can come back and revisit that at the end of the presentation. So first of all, we do want to recognize those who have been involved in the planning effort. And as Kevin mentioned, we've been working with the citizens-based advisory group throughout the process, and their names are listed here, along with your city staff and our consultant team. And then, of course, we acknowledge the Planning Commission and City Council as being part of our process as well. Here's how the plan is organized, and this is a sub-area plan, as Kevin mentioned, and so the hope is that this content can be integrated as appropriate into your comprehensive plan update, and we've structured it in a way that it should be able to be adapted into different elements and different goals and policy structures in the plan. So we have an introduction in the plan, a discussion of existing conditions. We did an up-to-date market assessment and demographic analysis. We also put together some forecasts specifically for this area for population, housing, and employment. And this again is to help the city understand, how many people, households, and jobs could we potentially expect to allocate in this area as it grows. And then we also have some recommendations, which I'll review with you. Here's our chart on the planning process, and we are here in 2023 at the end of our process, but we have been working on this plan for well over a year and have gotten some great input from the community as well as from our advisory group as we went through the planning process. So speaking of input, one of the things that we did early in the planning process is we had an online poll where we had 6 very short questions that we asked the community about this area. And some of the key takeaways that we heard were opportunities for small business development. So I thought that was really interesting when Steve Sugg talked earlier about the growth in business and particularly storefronts as well as home-based businesses. And this area is really a great area to focus some of that activity in the future. Also TOD opportunities and better access to parks and amenities. And as you hear regularly, people were concerned about traffic congestion, safety, making sure that the vision is accurately implemented, sustainability, and affordability. We asked people to describe in one or 2 words what they would really like to see in the Northeast Business District. So the bigger words that you see here are those that were mentioned most often. So of course we see businesses and shopping and safe, but also interestingly, we see an interest in place and community and livable and being walkable, people friendly. So that tells us that people are really interested in this becoming not just a business hub, but also a place where people can live and work and play and gather in the community as an important district in your community. And this diagram on the right is one that we often see or use in our planning activities, but it's really based around, what is a complete community? Sometimes people are calling these a 15-minute community. What can you access within 15 minutes from your home or your work on a daily basis? And, it's really kind of a best practice that we're using as we plan these areas. Let's just talk a little bit about the purpose of the plan and the context. I know you're all well aware that the Northeast Business District is one of 3 districts in the Regional Growth Center, including Town Center and the 27th Street Business District. And the purpose of the plan is really to establish specific provisions that align with redevelopment activity occurring in the district and the city's adopted code provisions. We reviewed your relatively new form-based code and made sure that the plan was consistent with that. And the plan will also help to ensure that future redevelopment aligns with the vision and guiding principles for this district. We kind of zoomed out a bit, so I was really glad to hear council members talking about things like transit and connectivity to the community, because that is definitely something that we took a look at, thinking about, where future light rail alignment and connections may occur in the Four Corners. Tacoma Community College and Four Corners area, for example, was something that was important because it's very close to the Northeast Business District. If you look at this map, here's the future light rail alignment and station area, and it's just right near the corner of the Northeast Business District here. We also did a bit of a walk-shed analysis from that corner, just so we could better understand what's a 5-minute walk, which is this kind of lighter color, a 10-minute walk, and a 15-minute walk. I'll pause. Was someone trying to ask a question? I thought I heard something.
No, I'll let you know if there is any.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, so we did have a vision and guiding principles that came out of the plan, and worked a lot with the advisory committee on developing this vision, and it's based on the input that we gathered from the community. And to cut to the chase, really, the community envisions that this area is easily accessible, that it's a hub for arts and community events, and so in addition to being a vibrant business district that has new housing options, that will include multifamily, mixed use, as well as live work, studio lofts, and other types of residences. There's an opportunity for small businesses and work from home businesses and other types of businesses to be located here. And it's near parks and open space. There's an opportunity to enhance that with better connectivity and paths, and through the expansion of business opportunities to provide more employment in the city. And that is something that is one of those state regulations that you were talking about a few minutes ago, that you guys have been allocated with a certain amount of growth in population and jobs, and so we need to find places in the community where we can have those, where we can accommodate those over the next 20 years. So the guiding principles are things that you would expect to see: a welcoming place that is for everyone, and it's a great place to live and work, diversity in housing and economic development opportunities, safe streets, and being aligned with the city's adopted form-based code, which also has a lot to do with preserving your community character and then enhancing the sense of the community. I apologize for the background noise. Just a little bit of data here. As we looked at the market, and I believe you guys have the full report as an appendix to the plan, it was important for us to really look at what's happening in the marketplace right now as we're coming out of the pandemic. What are the prospects for the future? And interestingly enough, there are some good prospects for industrial distribution, but those are for the really large, Amazon fulfillment centers and large industrial centers. So that's not really appropriate for this location. We're seeing growth in single-family housing, of course, multifamily, but less so. Growth is really down in hotels, office space, and retail. And I don't think I'm telling you anything that you're not already well aware of. You can skip to this one. And we also kind of took a look at what's actually happening in this district. What uses are there now and what uses are changing over before our very eyes. And there are a lot of apartments and multifamily uses there already. And then we're seeing projects like the Altaneros project come into this area. So being aware of that as we make a plan for the future is important. We took a look at property values and what other types of projects are being developed throughout the city, and what types of projects those have been. And if you'll notice for the Northeast Business District, there's really only been the one multifamily, but there are some that are coming up. There's interest in this area. We know that from talking with city staff. Here are the land use and the existing land use and the zoning designations. And so you can see the existing land use shows really a lot of sort of different types of uses in the district, whereas the zoning is more simplified and allowing different building heights of mixed-use development. So we wanted to make sure that our new land use plan was, rather than being so diverse and different, was really more aligning with this form-based code and those designations. This is, again, just kind of looking at some of the activity, projects under construction, potential and proposed projects in the district. And then a little bit of kind of looking in a crystal ball and trying to understand which properties are more likely to be developed based on things like improvement to land ratio, property values. We also looked at the Pierce County buildable lands inventory and what that indicated, and basically identified, some of the areas that are more likely to develop in the short to medium term versus some that might be more longer term. And from there, we went on to actually develop some scenarios. And I heard one of the council members talk about that earlier, taking things to that level of scenarios and vignettes to really understand what things could look like in the future. It's something that we wanted to make sure we did here in this district where we had the opportunity to get more specific. So using Altaneros as kind of a frame of reference, we looked at some other prototypical types of redevelopment that might occur in the district. We looked at other built examples of mid-rise mixed use, commercial uses, employment uses with structured parking. And we put together what we think is a fair assumption about what we might expect in terms of percentages of each of these types of uses. And then from there, we actually developed some vignettes to help people understand, how this area could continue to transform just beyond the Altaneros development that's already happening to other mixed-use type of development that could occur here in the future. So these are just some examples. I think it's always helpful for people to have an understanding at human scale of what change is going to look like or could look like. So this is the last piece of my presentation, just looking at kind of the forecast for actual increases in housing. We're looking at for housing units by 2044. Again, we're just like the comprehensive plan, we're matching up with that and looking 20 years ahead to 2044. We're anticipating that you could have another, roughly 2,900 housing units in this area. It's zoned for that already. There is the potential for property to redevelop and turn over. And so it's something that the city should plan for in terms of infrastructure needs and utility services and transportation services. And then for employment, we forecasted that you could potentially see, another 900 employees in the 917 compared to the 700 that are there today. So that was a little bit lower, and I think that might be slightly conservative just because we don't know, if there's office is it's just so slow in the market these days, and we just don't know if there's the potential maybe for a singular office type development to come in there. That could always happen, whether it's maybe a medical type facility or, something that the city would go out and recruit, a satellite headquarters of Amazon or something like that. But since those things are kind of outliers, we are being more conservative in what we forecast for employment. And I'll go on to the next slide here.
Before
so just
you,
to kind of cover.
Before you do, Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for this report. I'm loving it. I cannot wait to get home and with the full report with a nice big cup of tea, with my nice bunny slippers on, and just go through this with my highlighter and pen. I'm really looking forward to that and coming back with a whole host of questions. Kevin, as you know, this area is of keen interest to me, and so I'm happy to do that. The question I have is, I'm thinking, and I just want to verify, when you talk about the Northeast Business, you're just talking about the piece that's in UP, right? I mean, you also said Four Corners, which is another, area that I really like to talk about. But the Northeast District is only the piece of the Four Corners that's in University Place, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So then, when we talk about all of the uses, and I really like the pictures and the planning and the vignettes. I was the guy that talked about the vignettes. I really like that plan and thought going forward. The question I have is, if we're only talking about the UP part of that, a lot of that is being developed already with a whole bunch of apartments that are going on in that area. So where would we put a lot of the other stuff? We talking about redeveloping that strip that's right along 19th in our piece, or where else are we talking that we'd have opportunity to redevelop?
Yeah, I can answer that. If you look at the actually the slide that is up, you can see all those green parcels on that slide. Those are short-term, medium-term, possible for redevelopment. And now the Four Corners is a portion of the Northeast Business District. It is not the entire Northeast Business District. As you can see, the Northeast Business District goes all the way to 27th and Morrison. The Four Corners area is slightly smaller than that, and then extends into Fircrest and Tacoma areas. So there is a lot of potential, and we have another potential project on 27th and Morrison that is being looked at. So there's a lot of potential for redevelopment, kind of in the southern portion of the district.
Okay.
So let me jump in here. Kevin, there's a street, those two green blocks there. That street between those two green blocks of potential development. That's called 24th Street. And Mandy, can you put up the rendering of 24th? Because I think that's an example of something that's in the near to midterm.
Next,
You had it.
previous one,
Keep going back.
Go the other way. Right there.
That's it. So that's the street between those two green potential blocks. Because I was talking about to Kevin earlier today, asking him the same thing. Where is this? And so this is the potential of the type of development and the scale.
Yeah, that answers my question. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, excuse me, we have a hand up. Councilmember Wood?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And if I'm getting ahead of you with this question, I apologize. But one thing, we just had this discussion on the broader scale talking about community character. One of the things that I know has been brought up in previous meetings has been, as part of that character, is One of the things we enjoy here in UP is green space, parks, and connectivity. And I know this is the Northeast Business District Plan, which is kind of isolating it, but I would really like to better understand how this district is connected, physically connected, with the rest of the city, and particularly I'm concerned about green spaces, because in the area you're looking at, there isn't a single park. You have Sunset Terrace nearby, which is the only playground in the vicinity, and then you can go south to Paradise Pond, but Paradise, there is actually no sidewalk that extends all the way from the Northeast Business District down to Paradise Pond Park. And so I'd be interested in understanding, and I know it's getting a little outside the scope of out of the boundaries of the district, but how can we ensure that we have safe access to both those locations so that all those apartments with all those people who are moving in there actually have access to things they can do instead of playing in the industrial parking lots? Thank you.
Yes. To proceed, and I could help address that question as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so go ahead and finish your presentation.
I'll do it again.
Thank
I'll do it
you.
again.
Just
So I was
let her
just
finish.
about to move into talking about some of the recommendations in the plan. And guess what? Perfect segue, Councilmember Wood. We
Why not?
recognize, we recognized as well that there is a need for these new residents and people that are working here as well to have access to open space. And so, you know, that's something that is a needed improvement with sidewalk improvement, pathway improvements, bike lanes. You mentioned those earlier. So this diagram is showing kind of the walk radius around Sunset Park, as well as Paradise Pond Park, Adriana Hess Wetland Park. These are kind of more natural type open space area opportunities here, but we're just trying to emphasize how having that connectivity to these areas through future improvements, whether they be paths or boardwalks or whatever means to connect people to nature, will be really important. And then we're also showing here, just through some dotted conceptual grid lines, the importance of just having walkability, connectivity internal to the site as well, so people can safely walk around the district, you know, as part of their neighborhood experience. So that was important, and these are important recommendations in the plan for you to take a look at. We also were mindful of the street designations that are in your form-based code. We wanted to carry those forward here and implement a district plan for those, how those might look. And so we've got streets with parking. We've left some of the designations, of course, that have already been codified in the form-based code, but we're recommending some of these new streets take on kind of commercial street designations with on-street parking to serve the residents and businesses in those areas today. We have recommendations as well around the importance of partnership. And I think, as you were alluding to, the Four Corners planning area includes other jurisdictions, not just University Place. So to really bring that vision home, you guys will need to coordinate with the other partners, Tacoma Community College, Tacoma, and Furcrest and others who have jurisdiction there. The need for parks and open space and potentially new parks and trees and landscaping is also recognized in the plan. It's something that should be looked at with each development as part of the approval process. We talked a lot about sustainability, exploring green building options, looking at shared parking, electric vehicle charging stations, promoting bicycling to and from. You guys talked about climate change early on and minimizing vehicle miles traveled and carbon creation as it relates to that is part of thinking here with sustainability. So that's really it, and I'm happy to stand for any other questions that you all might have for this evening.
Councilmember Keel.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So again, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to talk about the northeast part of the Northeast Business District, right? Right there at that corner. And you did mention Four Corners and the fact that we've got to work with all of them. So is OTEC not looking at that at all? I mean, how can we, are they helping with that conversation? Like, none of this, I don't think, this Northeast really business districts really works if we don't somehow coordinate with the other folks. How is this plan going to connect with that?
Thank you for that question. And I think I'll actually ask Kevin if he would like to address that as well, because I know the city regularly coordinates with adjacent jurisdictions. And the plan calls out the importance of doing that. We were hired to put together a plan for your city inside your jurisdiction, but you always have to kind of open up and look at what's happening around you, and that's why this four corners planning area, is so key to implementing the vision for the Northeast Business District, which is right up here in this blue area. And then again, as I mentioned, the Four Corners area is just directly adjacent and encompassing of that. So I'll ask if Kevin would like to add anything to that.
Yes, I'd just add, while we included the Four Corners and added it on, like the maps and the diagrams and called it out in here to get it into a document and into a plan. Also, as one of the recommended actions under the regional collaboration is to continue to be involved in the Four Corners planning area to ensure regional cohesion in the new development around the planned area of the Four Corners. So as one of the policies out here is for us to continue that collaboration and keep moving the ball forward on that.
No, that's good. My other comment on that, and just for the record, I mean, and I've talked with staff a lot about this, light rail is coming there, as we all know, in a time in the future. One of the things that we've talked, on that Sound Transit Board is some type of we started saying a rail yard, that needs to be located somewhere, and they were thinking somewhere in the Four Corners area. They've then since said, not a full yard, maybe just someplace where we need to park trains for a little bit to start them up the next day. In any case, they're going to be looking for land to make that happen. And, as you guys know, Sound Transit is the 800-pound gorilla, and they have eminent domain authority. And so I'm real nervous when I look at this, and I'm looking at the slide with the yellow. I don't have pages on here, but there's a slide in here that talks about likely redevelopment long-term, and very cool, suspiciously, there's this yellow right at the corner of 19th and Mildred that makes a little L shape, and it's like future development long-term. So it's like we don't have plans for this right now, but that's to be developed long-term. What I'm hoping is that we're not making a nice little L space for Sound Transit to put their parking trains, right? And so, yeah, that yellow L right there, I hope we're not doing that. I mean, even unconsciously, because in my opinion, having something like that inside the city of University Place will diminish our character, it will diminish our tax base, and it will bring down the value of those properties that are nearby there. So all this development we're talking about doing, if we got a rail yard sitting there, we just lost the game. So, Steve, I know I talk to you about this all of the time, and I think that we really need to double down on this conversation to make sure that Sound Transit finds a different place to put that thing. And I'm saying that as the former chair of Sound Transit.
So with that, you made a good point. So this is our study, or whatever you want to call it here, but so what was that yellow thing there? Was that for the intent of leaving room for so can you explain that? Because that's what...
Yeah, let me show you that again, and then I'll show you this map where I am right now. So that yellow, let me just, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around here. I apologize for that. Okay, here we go. That yellow is just clearly to represent that this area, just based on our analysis of property values and improvement to land ratio, it's more of a longer term potential for redevelopment. But if you look at how that area is zoned, let me go back to the zoning. This is zoning and adopted already by the city. It's actually the highest intensity mixed use zoning that's allowed in the district, that purple color of up to 110 feet height, which in reality, that's not necessarily what people are building. They're building more 7-story type of mixed use. However, you are maximizing the value and future long-term redevelopment here by having that high intensity zoning. So that's about as much as I could say. I really feel like you are protecting that from the potential for future rail yard, but I don't know if Kevin or others would like to speak to that.
Okay, just to be clear, what we're asking, or at least I'm asking, I should speak for myself. None of those colors represent future intent for the rail yard, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's, I just want to make sure that's clear. I know we haven't had a chance to really, what Councilmember Keel says, I'm going to be highlighting this and reading it, and we'll be able to see all those color-coded legends there, and we'll figure that out. But just for now, just to help us leave here tonight without any anxiety, that would be nice. So that's fine, and we all understand what you just said. So we just want to be clear, and just for your comment about true that transit has eminent domain on anybody. However, I think that's not. However, that's the key point that I agree with you that we should be on that at all times, especially with staff who's leading this effort, that if there's any kind of a spark conversation from Sound Transit, it needs to be brought up to the council to help, so we can help that we mean no. Because I really believe what you said, Kent. It would be a very devastating. We did all this work to have a vibrant business, and according to the designation center, the regional center designation and housing, that has nothing to do with that, except for maybe transportation was a small, and to me it's small compared to everything else. So I think it would just take away from the city. That being said, I don't need any comments. It's just a comment to you guys on this. So I think that's what you're looking for, comments from us, right?
Correct.
Correct, okay. Any other comments? Councilmember McCluskey?
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, as I'm listening to all the comments from our colleagues and my colleagues and hearing your report, it almost seems like the design and analysis leading into more of a bedroom community piece to it. I don't really see a lot of economic development to support people to stay here and work. There's a lot of densification. We talked with Mr. White and going through here, and my concern as a sitting council member is the densification and where are our kids going to play. I don't want them playing in the parking lots of the apartment complexes. They need to be in a 2-minute or so walk so that they can move their muscles and expend their energies, or they're going to have a hard time sitting and learning in their classes. So that was the first thought that popped into my brain. The other is looking at possible retail and commercial development to support the densification, and what does that look like? How can we encourage the developers to not only build out the apartment complexes or the condos, whatever they're going to turn into, and have a retail component mixed in with that, because right now that's been a hard fix to do, especially in the Northwest Business District, where I was hoping that the Apex complex would be more retail to support not only the apartment dwellers, but also the interest of the community to come into that district area to augment economically and to find some of their needs. You know, we're restaurants, fun, recreation, things of that nature as well. So that's my comments with the overview of what I'm hearing right now. The other question I had is that in the business analysis, you did the employment analysis, but it only went to 2019. Is that the most current data that you had?
That's the baseline data for, the 2019 is based on what we had in the buildable lands report. So we wanted to use a data source that was, also being used in the region for planning. So that's why, we used that year instead of 2020, I guess. But yeah, more data available then. Also, I would say that in the industry, a lot of people talk about what an outlier the pandemic years have been. And so often we look at 2019 because that was prior to the pandemic, and it's more representative, we hope, of what we would see 20 years from now. So it's a better baseline than a pandemic year, which is really extraordinarily different.
Okay. Yeah, because in construction, looks like it has a little downturn, and that's not currently the case. So, okay. I thank you for your logic in using that data. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands up, but I do have a comment, and it has to do, again, around recreation and activities for the folks that are being, or for this housing that is occurring there. I think that it's all about infrastructure to allow for a safe and smooth and quick access, egress from there into ingress to those recreational areas. I think that it's there. I think it needs just to be shown better, because unless there's some other type of infrastructure that can be built, I think it would be really expensive. But you have the sidewalks going to 19th, going south to what's that park on 19th that you mentioned earlier?
Sunset Terrace. Sunset Terrace.
And so you have that park, and it's all sidewalk and everything. You have sidewalks and bicycle lanes all the way down on 19th going down. I know it's Tacoma, but it's public. I think it's called Snake Lake. Plenty of room, and it's really close. You're not going to have, most neighborhoods in our city they have to get on a bike or walk pretty good distance just to get to a recreational area, or in the car. And so these are fairly close. Along with Furcrest has various facilities, and it's all sidewalk from there over to Regions to Furcrest, and it's about a quarter mile. The only ones that doesn't is, of course, Paradise Pond, which I don't think there's any sidewalks on that one. But I think that's what we have to look forward to. How do we get that to allow more access to that? I know that there's, I think, sidewalks, very nice sidewalks, and ability to bike all the way down to 27th Street, where you turn west and over there by, where do you turn off to go to Hess and Arietta Park and all that recreational facility. That's all there within half a mile. And and it's all ready to go. So I think that there's plenty of recreational facilities for this block of land I just think that we just want to make sure that it's safe and it's all accessible and against traffic and things like that. So that's just my comments on that. Councilmember McCluskey.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, I understand that components to it, but if, as a family goes through their daily living life, these children have daily needs to get out and expend their energy, and when they do, they learn how to get along socially with others, large motor skills, which all helps augment their education. And a mom, a busy mom, can't do that daily, and these children need it daily. They're not getting enough of it at school. They come home, get to do their homework, they sit down, watch TV. It's not safe out there, so they keep them inside. So creating a safe, open space in the densification of each complex, so that when the moms are home and the dads are there and they're busy doing something, they can send the kids can go and play. Right now, if you look at some of the apartment complex currently that I've driven by, which is only very few, the children are playing in the parking lots of the apartment complexes. Why can't they have a park in the apartment complexes, like the Boulders, where they can go and expend that energy and have a great night's sleep because all their energy has been expended. They're growing, they're stretching, their muscles need development, and it's healthy. They won't gain weight. They won't eat as much junk food because they're actively playing, and they'll socially engage and learn from each other and hopefully be better students at the end of the day. So that was my concern with the densification of the apartments when there isn't any open space. We're providing little doggy parks so that the dogs can go relieve themselves in some cases, which is fine and good, but we're not really designing these complexes for our children. And that's where my anxiety comes in.
So if I may, and that is that it's a design standard then.
Correct.
And so, which has, we'll have to make someone's going to have to write up a legislation to do study session, to direct the Planning Commission and staff to look into design standard changes for further development in these apartments to make that happen. But certainly, I don't think that is part of this unless we want to start that process now with this, and that's something you might want to...
Well, that was kind of my
Your
recommendation.
comment? Okay.
Right, especially when they're in the parks and open space components to that.
So I asked staff,
So-
is that something that can be incorporated for this particular showcase that we're going through right now, or is that a whole different process?
I would just encourage the council to look at the overall recommendations at the end of the plan. There are recommendations in the plan that relate somewhat directly to what, and indirectly to what council members talking about. Under parks and open space, require new developments to meet code requirements related to provisions of public art, private open spaces, and amenities to enhance overall parks and recreation opportunities in the district. So we do have some policy recommendations that are in here. If you would like to, make additional recommendations to enhance those or add to those, this is perfectly the time to do that.
That's where I would say within the high densification of some of the complexes that they are required to have an open space for children to play.
I think Councilmember McCluskey is talking within the complex.
Yes.
Not as outside, as a public area within the district. She's speaking to within the complex, and the way I see that is in order for us to require them to build some recreational activity of some sort for their residents within their complex as part of their plan proposal to be approved, that's a whole different process.
It would have to get into the actual design standard development regulations. We do have requirements now for it's 10% building square footage as usable open space areas for the developments. That's what our current code is in the design standards. And like Alta at Narrows, for instance, they are putting in a children's play area, an outside pool, and a large picnic area and some other amenities in that particular complex. Some of our other complexes that are a little, I guess, smaller in overall size, that's a pretty large, but their amenity spaces are all internal to the buildings primarily, or some external plaza areas. They don't always put in the children's play areas unless they're the larger, on larger pieces of land. But Alta at Narrows is doing that because of the size.
Right, yeah. So maybe the next time we have a staff meeting, you can go over that with me, and then I'll figure out if I need to do a legislative proposal and at where the sweet spot would be. Because sometimes there's complexes abutting each other and there's no amenities for the children.
Great. Yes,
So
I'd be
that's
glad to, yeah.
Right, because parents can't every day get in a car and take their children out to play to expend their energy. So something more user-friendly that they can go out, it's a minute away, the kids can socialize with the other children that are in the complexes as well, and, you know, neighborhood playtime. Okay, right, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands, so thank you, Kevin, for allowing us to dive in a little bit with you on this, and thanks, let's see here. Mandy Roberts, thank you, Mandy, for appearing and for the report, and like Councilmember Keel said, very nice, lots of data and information and pictures that we can go back and deal with this. With that, I'd just like to ask the council, because this is our first study and looking through this, do we feel that we have enough? First of all, I should ask staff, do you have enough input? Do you need more input?
I believe if there is more input, since it is a large document, we'd be happy to take additional, recommendations or comments on the
Your mic.
Yeah, could you turn your mic on? I can't hear what you're saying, Kevin.
I apologize, I turned it off a little quickly there.
Wishful
We would definitely be open for any comments on the recommendations or revisions, as it is a large document as you go through that. And so there's opportunity to do that at this time, and we can, make an amendment to that to bring back.
So I understand. So it won't be this time because we're out of time basically for something like this. But the reason I was asking this because I think that being study number one, I like to, I'm recommending a suggestion, and I need your help on this, and that is to have a second study session so that we would be able to go and understand this, maybe call and ask some questions, and then come back with a final study session, hopefully final, with our final comments and suggestions for them to go away to finalize their work.
Yep.
I'm seeing okay. I'll get to you in a minute. Council, okay. So with that, I'm going to suggest to the mayor on our agenda meeting that we set up a study session 2 to allow everybody to dive in and absorb and be able to make some more comments. Councilmember Keel.
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion to your suggestion. It sounds like you finalized it, but in the next study session, it would be good to have the input from our other 2 colleagues that aren't here, right? So
What now? I didn't get that last
to have comments from the other 2 colleagues that aren't here today,
Right.
tonight. Yeah, so I'm glad you said we'll have a second study session because it would be good to have their input into this conversation. And so your earlier suggestion of get this to them, but then also let them know what the assignment is, right? To study it and do that.
Okay, looks like everybody's in agreement. So, Mr. Sugg, if you would, in your one-on-one with the mayor, which I'm sure you will before we could do an agenda meeting, is to let him know what the council desire is on
Will
that,
do.
please.
Will do.
So with that, I am adjourning the study session.
Great, we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you all.